The fluorescent light in Peter Strzok's FBI office hummed a low, constant note, a sterile counterpoint to the storm of ink and adrenaline on the page before him. It was late July 2016, and the air conditioning fought a losing battle against the DC humidity seeping in from the outside dark. He scrawled the final words of the email, a personal message to a colleague, a lawyer named Lisa Page, with whom he was having an affair. The words were stark, unvarnished, a raw nerve in the midst of a nascent, top-secret investigation. "We'll stop it," he wrote. A private conviction about a presidential candidate that would, in time, become a grenade tossed into the very heart of American democracy. He hit send. The message vanished into the ether of the Bureau's servers, a digital ghost that would one day return with a vengeance. At that moment, it was just a secret within a secret, because in a secure room on another floor, a different kind of traffic was being monitored, a single cryptic line that had just lit up a screen. A foreign government, he was told, might be whispering in the ear of the Trump campaign. This was the spark. This was the genesis of Operation Crossfire Hurricane. The name, pulled from a Rolling Stones lyric, was a piece of bureaucratic poetry masking a profound dread. It was not born of certainty, but of a terrifying possibility. The possibility that a hostile power was not just attacking American elections, but co-opting them from within. The atmosphere at the FBI's headquarters was a thick cocktail of professional rigor and cold sweat anxiety. This was the thing they trained for, the ultimate threat, and it was unfolding in real time. A slow-motion detonation under the bright, gaudy lights of a presidential race. Director James Comey, a man who carried his towering frame like a cathedral of procedure, was briefed. His face, usually an unreadable slate, was grim. The evidence was thin, circumstantial, a series of strange connections and odd contacts. But the source was credible. The stakes were existential. He gave the authorization. The hurricane was now official. And so the machinery began to turn. A silent, invisible engine of state power. In a SCIF, a sensitive compartmented information facility, deep within the J. Edgar Hoover building, a small, vetted team assembled. The room was a tomb, windowless and soundproofed, the air smelling of recycled oxygen and cold coffee. Glowing monitors cast a pale blue light onto faces etched with concentration. They weren't chasing a bank robber or a terrorist cell. They were chasing a phantom, a concept, collusion. They started with the low-hanging fruit, the public contacts. Carter Page, a former investment banker in Moscow with a history of grandiose claims about his Russian connections, was an immediate person of interest. His travels to Moscow in July 2016 were a red flag. George Papadopoulos, a young, eager foreign policy advisor for the Trump campaign, had drunkenly boasted to an Australian diplomat in a London bar that the Russians had dirt on Hillary Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. The Australian government had passed this information to the FBI, and it landed in the SCIF like a live wire. This was no longer just about odd contacts. This was about a specific offer of assistance. The investigation began to spin outwards, a web of surveillance and human sources. Agents pulled all-nighters, their desks buried under a snowdrift of classified cables, financial records, and transcripts of intercepted communications. The FISA court, the secret tribunal that oversees surveillance of foreign agents, was petitioned for a warrant on Carter Page. The application was thick, dense, a masterpiece of intelligence weaving. It cited the Papadopoulos information, Page's own travels and contacts, and, crucially, the infamous Steele Dossier. This document, a collection of memos compiled by former British spy Christopher Steele, was a lurid, unverified tapestry of conspiracy and compromat. Its pages filled with tales of golden showers in a Moscow hotel room and clandestine meetings. The agents in the SCIF knew it was raw intelligence, a mix of gossip and possible truth, but it was a piece of the puzzle, and in the pressurized environment of Crossfire Hurricane, every piece was given weight. One agent, staring at a particularly salacious claim, muttered to his partner, "You can't make this shit up." His partner, never looking up from his screen, replied flatly, "Someone did. The question is who?" The political landscape outside was tearing itself apart. At Trump rallies, the candidate railed against the rigged system and praised WikiLeaks, which was now methodically dumping the stolen Democratic emails. Inside the FBI, every new dump was like a hammer blow. They were watching a crime in progress, a digital Watergate, and they felt paralyzed. The tension was not just professional, it was deeply personal. Strzok and Page, their own relationship a violation of Bureau protocol, exchanged texts that were a fever chart of the investigation's stress. "He's not ever going to become president, right? Right?" Page texted. Strzok's response was the one that would later haunt him. No, he won't. We'll stop it." It was a sentiment born of fury and fear, a private hope that would be publicly framed as a treasonous plot. Then, the unthinkable happened. Donald Trump won. The news hit the SIF like a physical blow. The agents who had been working for months to uncover a potential Russian plot to help him now had to confront the reality that their subject would be the next commander-in-chief. The atmosphere shifted from one of urgent investigation to one of profound dread. The hurricane was no longer approaching. It had made landfall, and they were standing directly in its path. Comey, looking gaunt and weary, was now in an impossible position. How do you brief a president-elect on an investigation into his own campaign? The meeting at Trump Tower was surreal. The gilded elevator, the opulent office, the president-elect surrounded by his inner circle. Comey, the G-man from Central Casting, delivered the sensitive news about the Steele Dossier, briefing him on the unverified allegations as a courtesy to arm him against potential blackmail. Trump's reaction was muted, but a seed was planted. He would later call Comey and, in a conversation that would contribute to his firing, say, "I need loyalty. I expect loyalty." The request hung in the air, a direct challenge to the FBI's independence. The pressure was now coming from all sides. The public knew nothing of Crossfire Hurricane, but the political air was thick with accusations. Trump was tweeting about wiretapping and a witch hunt. And then, in May 2017, Comey was fired. The news flashed across the screens in the SCF. For the agents of Crossfire Hurricane, it was an act of political arson. The special counsel was appointed, and the weight of the investigation was transferred to the quiet, methodical, and relentlessly focused Robert Mueller. The FBI team handed over their files, their leads, their sleepless nights. The hurricane had a new pilot, but the winds were only getting stronger. The unraveling began, not with a bang, but with an Inspector General's report. The Justice Department's internal watchdog was scrutinizing the FBI's conduct, and in the digital archives they found the Strzok Page texts. The moment they were discovered, an agent working for the IG knew it was over for the operation's credibility. The private frustrations, the political animus, it was all there, a gift to the president and his allies. The texts were leaked, and the public narrative of Crossfire Hurricane was instantly poisoned. It was no longer a necessary investigation into a grave national security threat. It was a coup, a deep state plot, led by biased officials. Strzok was fired. Page resigned. The public, already fractured, chose sides based on the new, damning context. But the machinery of justice, though battered, was still turning. Mueller's team was securing guilty pleas and indictments. Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign chairman, was going to prison for financial crimes unrelated to Russia. George Papadopoulos pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Roger Stone was indicted for obstruction. The final report was a complex, sprawling document that detailed sweeping and systematic Russian interference and numerous contacts between the Trump campaign and Russia, but ultimately found insufficient evidence to prove a criminal conspiracy. For the agents who had started it all, it was a Pyrrhic victory. They had uncovered the attack, but the central question of coordinated collusion remained, in the eyes of the law, unanswered. The CIF was eventually emptied. The monitors were turned off. The stale coffee cups were tossed away. The agents were reassigned, their careers shadowed by the political firestorm they had ignited. The legacy of Operation Crossfire Hurricane is not a single, satisfying conclusion, but a permanent scar on the American psyche. It is a story of how the very institutions designed to protect the Republic became weaponized in a war over truth itself. It is a tale of good faith meeting bad, of secrets breeding more secrets, of a nation so divided it could no longer agree on what was real. The final haunting image is not of a courtroom verdict or a resigned president, but of that empty, silent skiff. A room where a handful of people, armed with nothing but their oaths and a terrifying suspicion, opened a door they could never close, and the wind still howls through it.